Think we live in an exceedingly angry world? You bet. Today's anger illiteracy epidemic is massive. Think you do just fine with anger? Your own? Other people's? Think again. There are 4 distinctly different shades of anger. 3 are harmful, 1 is helpful. Think anger management is enough? Not even close. Why? Because each shade of anger must be dealt with very differently from the other 3. Isn't it time for you to develop full spectrum anger effectiveness? So what is the full spectrum anger effectiveness system, and how can you enroll? There are 4 shades of anger. 1 is helpful, but it's rarely called anger. 3 are harmful, but are far too common. Anger management helps with only 1. Even most psychotherapists don't know what you're about to discover, which is full spectrum anger effectiveness. So you see on your screen a diagram that depicts full spectrum anger effectiveness and this system that I call Conquering Anger Mountain that includes boundaries, escalation, flooding, anger purgatory, completion, repair, and a new plan. At the bottom you see the lodge, which is simply a symbol. The whole thing is a symbol, of course, but the lodge is a symbol of feeling cozy in front of the fireplace with your friends and enjoying a great time. And you simply emerge out of the lodge onto Anger Mountain when there are boundaries to discover or honor. And if those aren't discovered and honored, then you make your way through various parts of Anger Mountain. What full spectrum anger effectiveness is your ability to recognize and embody helpful empowered anger, which is boundaries, and recognize and take responsibility when you're in distorted, disempowered, harmful anger, which is escalation, flooding, and anger purgatory or looping anger, and bringing yourself back from those forms of anger that are not helpful into helpful, authentic, empowered anger with attendant repair and a new plan if and as necessary. The 4 shades of anger effectiveness include boundaries, self-disclosure without justifying yourself. That requires boundary effectiveness upgrades. Escalation, which is agitation on top of boundaries, and the agitation is created by inner critic negative perspective. And that calls for escalation U-turn effectiveness upgrades. Flooding anger, which is reptilian brain takeover, where stress chemicals in our brain shut down the thinking part of our brain, the cortex, and activate the limbic system, the reptile part of our brain, which is all about fight, flight, freeze, or faint. And flooded anger calls for time-out effectiveness upgrades. And then anger purgatory, stuck, looping, recycling anger, which calls for effectiveness upgrades in anger completion and repair. Why does each shade of anger require different effectiveness skills? Well, boundaries prevents the 3 harmful forms of anger from having to show up in the first place. Escalation calls for U-turns back to boundaries. Flooding makes escalation U-turns temporarily impossible and requires timeouts instead. And looping anger, anger purgatory, recycling anger, requires completing old unresolved anger that keeps being involuntarily reactivated in the present, so you stop being triggerable in the first place.